You are not overthinking. That is the first thing that needs to be said clearly. Because when the mind does not stop, when thoughts repeat themselves, when you feel like you are constantly analyzing something, the most common conclusion is this: I am overthinking. But most of the time, what is happening is not excessive thinking. It is vigilance. The mind is not producing thoughts by mistake. It is maintaining attention. It is observing. It is checking whether everything is safe. That distinction completely changes how the experience is interpreted. Overthinking feels like a problem. Being on guard is a protection mechanism, and protection is one of the oldest functions of the human brain. Since the beginning of human life, survival depended on noticing changes quickly, noticing a sound, noticing movement, noticing a signal that was out of pattern. That ability to detect risk early increased the chances of survival. That is why the brain was shaped to watch, before relaxing, before resting, before switching off. It checks, it observes, it monitors. This process happens automatically, without you noticing, without you deciding, without you controlling it. Today, threats are different. Most of the time, they are not physical, but the system continues to function in the same way. It keeps searching for signals, keeps evaluating possibilities, keeps trying to predict what might happen. And this can show up as constant thinking, as repeated analysis, as reviewing situations again and again. But the origin is not thinking, the origin is vigilance. Now think about a simple situation. You send an important message and have not received a response yet. Nothing has happened, no problem has appeared. But the mind keeps returning to the subject. Did the person see it? Did they understand? Did something go wrong? That mental movement does not happen by accident. It happens because the brain is monitoring uncertainty. Uncertainty requires attention. Attention requires energy. And limited energy creates fatigue. That explains why constant thinking is so exhausting. Not because you are doing something wrong, but because the system is working. There is an important detail here. The brain does not respond only to real danger. It responds to the possibility of danger. That distinction is fundamental. If there is any signal of uncertainty, the system remains active, even when the environment is safe, even when nothing is happening, even when everything appears calm. This happens because the brain prefers prevention. It prefers to check. It prefers to confirm. That behavior is prudent, but it also consumes energy. Over time, that continuous consumption creates wear. You may have already noticed this. You are not in crisis. You are not facing a major problem, but you feel tired. You feel tension. You feel difficulty relaxing. That sensation does not appear out of nowhere. It comes from the invisible effort of staying alert. One element that deserves attention is the role of memory. The brain learns from previous experiences. If something went wrong in the past, it records it. If something caused difficulty, it remembers. If something required effort, it prepares. That learning creates expectation, and expectation increases vigilance, even after the situation has changed, even after the problem has disappeared, even after the environment has become safe. The system remains attentive, not by mistake, but for protection. Now, it is worth noticing something many people overlook. Being on guard does not necessarily mean being anxious. There is not always fear. There is not always intense worry. Sometimes there is only a light sense of alertness, a constant attention, a quiet readiness, as if the system were waiting for something. That feeling may seem normal, but it requires energy, and limited energy creates fatigue. Take a moment to consider an interesting detail: the relationship between responsibility and vigilance. When something depends on you, the brain increases attention. It tries to avoid mistakes. It tries to anticipate problems. It tries to guarantee results. That mental effort can continue even after the task is finished, even after the day is over, even after you try to rest, because the system is still checking, still evaluating, still monitoring. There is also an important phenomenon known as internal monitoring. The brain does not observe only the external environment. It observes the body itself. It observes emotions. It observes thoughts. It observes sensations. This process helps detect changes, helps anticipate problems, helps maintain stability, but it also consumes energy, and when that consumption continues for too long, fatigue appears. Over time, this state of vigilance can become habitual. The brain learns the pattern, learns to remain attentive, learns to respond quickly, learns to monitor constantly. That learning creates a habit of attention, a habit of analysis, a habit of vigilance, and habits are difficult to interrupt. Now, consider a simple question. Have you ever noticed how silence can increase thinking? During the day, there are stimuli, noise, movement, activity. But at night, everything slows down. The environment becomes quiet, and when the environment becomes quiet, attention increases. The brain begins searching for signals, begins monitoring sensations, begins checking possibilities. That explains why many people think more at night. Not because they are exaggerating, but because the system is on guard. That state also influences the body. When the mind remains alert, the body follows. Muscles become tense. Breathing becomes more shallow. Sleep becomes heavier and less restorative. That activation prevents full recovery. And when recovery is incomplete, fatigue accumulates. You may recognize this pattern. You sleep, but wake up tired. You rest, but remain exhausted. You try to relax, but the mind stays active. This does not mean weakness. It does not mean lack of discipline. It does not mean incapacity. It means vigilance. And understanding that changes how you interpret the experience. Because when you realize the problem is not overthinking, self-criticism decreases, guilt decreases, pressure decreases. That shift reduces stress, and that makes recovery easier. Now, there is an important idea that needs to be remembered. The brain does not maintain vigilance out of stubbornness. It maintains vigilance for protection. It tries to avoid surprise. It tries to reduce risk. It tries to ensure safety, even when that creates discomfort, even when that creates fatigue, even when that makes rest more difficult. And that understanding leads to a simple conclusion. You are not overthinking, you are on guard, because being on guard is not a mistake. It is an automatic response of the nervous system, a response that appears when the brain believes it needs to protect you, even if you do not notice it. Even if there is no obvious danger, even if everything seems calm on the surface, the system stays alert. There is something important to understand here. Vigilance is not just a behavior. It is a physiological state, a state in which the body remains prepared to react, prepared to respond, prepared to act quickly. When this state lasts for a long time, it changes how you experience the world. Attention becomes more intense. The senses become more sensitive, the mind becomes more active, the body becomes more tense. This set of responses serves a clear function, to increase responsiveness, but it also carries a cost, a quiet cost, a cost that is not always noticed right away. Maintaining constant attention requires energy. Maintaining readiness requires resources. Maintaining vigilance requires effort, even when you are not visibly doing anything. Even when you are sitting, even when you are in silence. That is why some people feel tired without an obvious reason, because the work is happening inside. Now, take a moment to reflect on something that often goes unnoticed. The brain relaxes when it recognizes predictability, when it perceives patterns, when it understands what to expect. But when uncertainty exists, it remains attentive. It tries to anticipate changes. It tries to predict outcomes. It tries to avoid surprise. That continuous movement keeps the mind active, keeps the system running, keeps the body in a state of readiness. Past experience also plays a decisive role in this process. If you have lived through periods of pressure, periods of intense responsibility, periods of instability, the brain learns, It learns that it needs to watch. It learns that it needs to check. It learns that it needs to prepare. That learning does not disappear quickly. It remains as a pattern, a quiet pattern, an automatic pattern, a pattern of vigilance. Consider the following question. What happens when you feel you do not have control over a situation? Naturally, attention increases. The mind tries to follow every detail. It tries to predict what might happen. It tries to reduce uncertainty. That mental effort can be subtle, but it requires energy, and limited energy creates wear. Over time, that wear becomes noticeable. First, a mild tension appears, then difficulty relaxing appears, then fatigue appears, then irritability appears. These signals do not show up by accident. They indicate continuous energy consumption. Another point worth noticing is repetition. The longer the system remains on guard, the more automatic that state becomes. The brain learns to maintain elevated attention, learns to stay alert, learns to respond quickly. That creates a habit, and habits function without conscious effort. They happen automatically, even when they are no longer necessary. Now think about the impact of this on the body. The human body was not designed to remain in constant alert. It needs to alternate between activity and recovery. It needs moments of slowing down. It needs periods of deep rest. Without that alternation, wear appears. That wear shows up in familiar ways. Persistent fatigue, difficulty concentrating, a sense of tension, low energy. These symptoms do not indicate weakness. They indicate prolonged effort. Another point worth observing is the role of sleep. Sleep is the main recovery mechanism of the body, but if the brain remains alert, sleep loses depth. The body rests partially, but does not recover completely. That explains why some people sleep many hours and still wake up tired. Because the system never fully switched off. It kept monitoring, kept evaluating, kept checking. Here, an important distinction appears. Relaxing is not the same as deactivating. Relaxing means reducing activity. Deactivating means leaving the state of alert. Without that deactivation, recovery remains incomplete. And when recovery remains incomplete, fatigue stays. Now consider this carefully. Are you aware of the impact vigilance has on memory? Memory depends on energy. When energy declines, memory falters. Simple information is forgotten. Names take longer to surface. Details slip past unnoticed. That can create insecurity. It can create doubt, but the cause remains wear. Another common effect shows up in attention. When the system remains on guard, attention becomes selective. The brain begins searching for possible problems, begins observing details, begins detecting changes. That constant focus increases mental effort, and continuous mental effort creates fatigue. You may have noticed something like this. Even on calm days, the mind remains active. Even when nothing urgent is happening, the body stays tense. Even when everything is under control, there is a sense of alertness. This experience is not unusual. It is predictable. It is biological. It is a protective response. Another important point to understand is that the brain responds to perception, not only to reality. If the system perceives risk, it reacts, even when the environment is safe, even when there is no real threat. That difference explains why some people remain alert even in calm situations. Now observe the impact of this on emotions. When the system stays activated, tolerance decreases, patience decreases, sensitivity increases. Small situations feel bigger. Small problems feel more difficult. That does not indicate a personality change. It indicates wear. Another relevant detail is the relationship between vigilance and performance. In risky situations, vigilance increases efficiency, but when it becomes constant, it reduces performance, because energy consumption becomes high, and limited energy reduces capacity. This process is gradual, quiet, progressive. First comes the sensation of effort, then comes difficulty concentrating, then comes fatigue, then comes exhaustion. That exhaustion does not appear dramatically. It settles in slowly, like a weight that increases little by little, like a battery that drains without warning. Now, it is worth reflecting on how we interpret these signals. When you believe you are overthinking, pressure increases. When you believe you are failing, self-criticism increases. But when you understand you are on guard, understanding increases. That shift reduces tension, reduces stress, reduces wear. Understanding does not solve everything, but it changes the experience, and changing the experience already reduces part of the effort. Another important element is adaptation. The brain adapts to the environment. If the environment demands constant attention, it maintains vigilance. If the environment becomes predictable, it reduces vigilance. That adaptation happens automatically, without conscious decision, without deliberate effort. Now think about something simple. How many times have you felt tired without a clear reason? No crisis, no urgent problem, no intense physical effort. That feeling can seem confusing, but there is an explanation. Prolonged vigilance consumes energy, and limited energy creates fatigue. That relationship is direct and predictable. Another detail worth noticing is the sensation of living in alert mode. Some people describe it as urgency, others as tension, others as restlessness. But biologically, it is vigilance, and continuous vigilance reduces well-being, reduces rest, reduces energy. Now we arrive at the central idea. You are not overthinking, you are protecting yourself. You have not lost control. You are attentive, you are not exaggerating. You are on guard, and that understanding opens the door to the next question. If the system remains on guard, if vigilance continues, if energy consumption remains high, then a natural question appears. Why do you feel tired even on calm days? Why does exhaustion show up even when nothing urgent is happening? That is exactly the question we are going to explore next. Why do you feel drained, even on quiet days?